Hello everyone, great to see you. This week I want to talk about imposter syndrome. Specifically, I want to let you know what I learned about imposter syndrome so you can avoid it altogether. So, when I think of myself as a pretty confident person. I've been able to lecture in front of large groups of people before. I've been able to start my own running gait analysis clinic. You've heard all of my background before, and if you haven't, go check it out. But long story short, I like to think I'm fairly confident in the things I do. However, I remember when I first started doing running gait analysis, and I remember I really kind of felt like an imposter. I was worried about a number of things. I was worried that potentially my patients or my runners would know more than I would. I was worried that they would ask me questions I wouldn't know the answer to. I was also worried that potentially they would just bring up a topic or bring up a subject about running that I wouldn't be able to answer or to speak knowledgeably about. And the fact is, I get questions all the time from runners, and what I realize is that there's so many questions out there, there's so many things out there, you can't know everything. But it's really, really easy to get imposter syndrome. It didn't help that I was also charging patients and runners $250 for these running gait analyses, and also I was a new PT at a new clinic, and this was a new program I was bringing there, and I wanted it to be successful. So all those things compounded on me to kind of give me some of this imposter syndrome. But what I realized is that there's a couple old adages, and one in particular that I'm thinking, that you can't follow. And you can't really follow fake it till you make it. Because if you fake it, patients might get hurt, they could get bad outcomes, and you might build a bad reputation. You never want to fake anything, especially when it comes to the medical world. So there's a couple things that really helped me, and I want to share those things with you today so that you can avoid imposter syndrome. Because believe it or not, you have a lot to offer, and you have a lot of great things you can contribute, and runners would be happy to get those things from you. So the first thing I realized was something I touched on a little bit already. Runners don't really know as much as you think. I remember a runner came in to see me and they talked about how they might have a specific way that they wanted to run, and they read a book about how to run, and they had read several books, and they had all these shoes that they were very passionate about. They were very passionate about using a specific shoe, a specific style of running that they read about, and specifically they had a whole training regimen that they were using. And these are pretty common questions. Questions about training regimens, questions about the way they should run, the style they should run, the benefits of running forefoot, first rear foot. We'll talk about that. And different shoes, what types of shoes, different new modern shoes or new shoes on the market, and what are your thoughts? You get those questions all the time. But as you become more and more experienced in running gait analysis, you start to tune out some of that white noise. And some of that is when runners come in and say, have you read the newest book, the latest book that's out there about running gait analysis? It has an idea that we should all be running on our feet and our hands at the same time. And you think to yourself, there's no way that is going to be successful. And it's always good to read the information out there. It's always good to be able to see and know what's out there, to be able to talk knowledgeably. But a lot of it is just white noise. Because when you think about it, a lot of those different ideas about the way to run, running gait analysis, or running in general, come from a lot of different sources. Some of those sources have great information, and some of it is evidence-based information that is truly impactful to the world of running. But other aspects of that information aren't so vetted. They don't have research studies behind them. They maybe are anecdotal. Or maybe one of my favorite books that runners will talk to me about will talk about how to run forefoot or will run barefoot. And quite honestly, while that specific running style works for some people, a very, very small amount of people, the forefoot, not the barefoot, it isn't a lot of people that it's actually really good for. So you start to realize that there's a lot of white noise out there and a lot of different opinions. Not all of them are evidence-based practice. In fact, a lot of them aren't. So remember that what we learn as PTs, we learn evidence-based practice. That's what we want to practice. That's what we want to operate in. And that's what we want to stick with. So when runners come in and ask you these questions, it's always good to identify the information you know. And I'm always straightforward, and I always say, I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard that it's good to run on your feet and hands at the same time. Where'd you learn that? Where'd you read that? Who told you about that? And so I ask a lot of questions and I'm really transparent. I haven't heard of that. It's not been something I've come across. I'm happy to research it for you. I'm happy to get back to you on that. And I usually do like to learn what's out there because I'm curious and because I like to know. But again, a lot of it is with a very skeptical eye. Would I actually recommend this to my own runners or my own patients? And so that's when I really like to make sure that I'm telling the runner or the patient, I'm telling them what the research is, I'm telling them what maybe some of the consumer information is, and then where there's a gray area. Hey, we haven't done enough research on this yet. Here's the emerging data. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't. We're going to try this approach, but we don't have enough evidence to know if this, or this works. Specifically, there's a really good example that a runner came and asked me a question about, and that was specifically about forefoot running. And he specifically said, I just read a book about forefoot running, and this was the example I alluded to just a little bit ago, but I read a book on forefoot running, and I believe that I should only land forefoot, and that I can run faster with less injury, and that's the way I want to run. Can you teach me how to run that way? And my first thought was, well, I don't know if I can teach you how to run that way, but I don't know if I want to teach you that way because that might not be the safest thing for you. And if you look back in some of our old information on solutionseducation.com, you'll find that we had a blog post about the truth about forefoot and rear foot running. And while I won't make you go back and look at it right now, I do think it is a valuable article to read because it's a really common misconception among runners. And that misconception is that forefoot running actually is a better way to run or a less injury-prone way to run, that they can run faster. Now, let me be very clear. Forefoot running is a great way to run for some runners. Some runners benefit from it. Some runners also lessen the impact through their bodies, and they also are able to run without as much injury and as much risk to injury, and they can run faster. And I will actually recommend some runners to run either slightly more forefoot or get them off their heels a little bit. And that is certainly part of the running form changes that we'll make. However, it's not right for everyone. Specifically, there are some people out there that are really contraindicated to run on their forefoot. For example, folks that have instability in their ankles, in their knees, in their hips, so maybe some valgus collapse of their knees, hip drop, overpronation, those are all going to be really hard to run forefoot safely because it's going to reduce the amount of stability you have through your lower extremities. You are not using your heel, your arch, to really support yourself, so you're going to be rolling on your forefoot, most likely from lateral to medial, and there's a bunch of different issues that can occur when you do that. The truth is that runner was incorrect. There are benefits to running forefoot. There's benefits to running rear foot. There's injuries with forefoot running. There's injuries with rear foot running. And the extremes of either side, really hitting hard on your heels or really being on your toes, both have risks. So what I told that patient, that runner, was I explained this to them. And I explained how there's different anatomical makeups, different footwear, and different biomechanics that are best for each of those forefoot and rear foot runners. I ended up talking to him about rear foot running, and believe it or not, once I explained the research and the basis for my recommendations, he was 100% on board. And then, about a month later, he told me he improved his marathon time by 21 minutes on his next race. And I was blown out of the water. I was so happy, and he was a believer. He said, from now forward, I'm just doing whatever you tell me. I don't care what it is, I'm doing it. So that's not always what we want, but it was a good outcome for that runner. But there's a couple things that are easy to forget and easy to remember for us. And one of those things is that it's very easy to get caught up in knowledge blindness. And you may or may not be familiar with that term, but basically, we all really need to start somewhere. You may not have a large expertise in running gait analysis. In fact, maybe this is your very first running gait analysis. Maybe you've been a PT in an inpatient setting or a SNF setting or potentially a home health setting. The fact is you've done some gait analysis before, but maybe you haven't broken into running gait analysis. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I haven't really broken into running gait analysis. Do I really know that much about running? And maybe you don't know the latest research on forefoot and rear foot running, or maybe it's just hard to articulate that while a patient is sitting in front of you. I have certainly been there. So when we think about those things, one of the things we want to think about is that as all PTs, you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of practice in analyzing gait. You've had practice in analyzing a runner's gait, not only from the way that they were running on a treadmill. But even if you weren't analyzing a runner's gait, you've had practice analyzing a walking gait analysis. And so you've been able to do some of this before at some point. And you have an expertise that allows you to be able to contribute that and to be able to provide something for your runners. Now, this might be the first time you're doing a running gait analysis, as I mentioned, and there's some great tools that we can use to be able to help you bridge that gap from walking gait analysis to running gait analysis. But you know how to identify things like a hip drop or valgus collapse or overpronation. You know how to identify whether they're landing on their heel or their midfoot or their forefoot. In fact, you know a lot. So you really want to be able to have confidence that your knowledge, it took you years to get all that knowledge, you have a lot of it to contribute. And runners certainly don't know all of that. That same runner that told me that he needed to run forefoot and that he needed to run in minimal shoes and all the other things, he couldn't identify that nuance of a slight foot external rotation when he ran. He couldn't identify the genivalgum or the knee collapse or the hip drop. So there's a lot of those little nuanced things that you can identify because you are a great PT. Additionally, there's other things that you can identify because you can look at the way they're running, you can correlate it to a plan of care, and so you can correlate all of that great running gait analysis into what actually they're going to do to get better. We need you to practice bridges, or we need you to improve gluteus medius strength, or we need to improve how much you're able to move your hip into hip flexion or extension or whatever it is. You can combine all your knowledge to be able to help your runners get better and to reach their running goals. So remember, you really do offer a lot. And even if you're just starting out with running gait analysis, you can use that and apply it, and you can use your background to be able to really contribute a lot for these patients. So what I implore you to do is to not let imposter syndrome paralyze you. Make sure that you can start doing a running gait analysis because you have a ton to offer. But also remember that while you're doing that running gait analysis, don't just give away your time for free. Now, sure, you might accept the patient's insurance and do a visit through insurance, or you might decide to actually charge that patient an out-of-pocket cost. Whatever you're comfortable with, I do implore you to charge patients or to get paid for your time, because your expertise is a very high level of expertise that you've taken years to learn. You can apply that to a running gait analysis. You can give patients a really good plan of care, and then you can always ask them, what things could I improve? What could I do better? You could do follow-ups for free if you wanted to, or you could do a reassessment for free. But do charge them for something, because it's highly valuable what you're offering, and you are going to give them a good outcome. You are going to give them something they didn't know before, because you know a lot about this subject just based on the fact that you've had a considerable amount of gait analysis training in your background. So make sure you get compensated for your time. Now, one of the best ways you can get you can overcome imposter syndrome is going to be to take some course on running gait analysis. And you can go ahead and check out our courses and see what we have to offer. We'd love to help you out and be able to help you along your running gait analysis journey. And as always, reach out to us with any questions you have or anything that we can go over with you or discuss. Until next time, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.